I have to say that I have just come back from the Palestinian territories and indeed Israel, and this is clearly a sensitive issue. And the fact that the Israeli authorities are now not going to go ahead with the scheme to ban Palestinians from buses is a hugely optimistic development. And I'm delighted that the outrage and indeed the pressure being brought to bear on the Israeli authorities have clearly borne fruit. Discrimination and indeed racism manifest themselves in all kinds of ways. And that was one of the most basic. And it has created worldwide interest because it evokes the Rosa Parks saga the United States experienced in the 1950s.
Now, Nabila, you've travelled in some of these buses from Israel to the West Bank. So give us a sense of the commute for the many Palestinians. How have you seen them being treated?
Well, in practical terms, that means that it's a disaster, effectively, for Palestinian workers. Impoverished Palestinians are forced to seek low-paid jobs in Israel, often on building sites, and are already facing long commutes. And I have often taken buses from Ramallah, which is in the West Bank, to Jerusalem, and every time the Arabs on board were made to feel like criminals. And it has to be said that before getting on board, you have to go through a gated corridor, the kind you get in high security prisons, and then through a military checkpoint. And heavily armed soldiers carry out body searches, and many would-be passengers are often denied entry into Israel for no apparent reasons. And for the rest of us, a journey which would have taken 15 minutes could take up to 2.5 hours. And this is despite the fact that the Israeli army insists that the security measures they impose on Arab workers actually guarantee safe journeys and prevent illegal overnight stays for those workers.
But let me ask you this. Jewish settlers who use the same buses, they will argue that allowing Palestinian passengers onto the buses creates, this is what they've been saying, creates a security risk. What's your take on that?
Well, that's clearly not what the Israeli army is saying. I've just quoted, Israeli officials saying that Arab workers do not represent a security threat precisely because they go through those heavy searches and indeed militarized checkpoints. And they are very rare incidents of actually Arab workers creating problems on those buses. The reality is that you're more likely to have Arab workers being discriminated against and indeed abused by Israeli authorities or indeed Jewish settlers than the other way around. And this move would have been a disaster. And as I said earlier, it's a huge cause for optimism that he has been called off. And it has to be said that even many Israeli voices, including high-profile Israeli officials, have welcomed that the proposed ban has come to a halt, including the president of Israel. And indeed, last year, the ban was already considered for application, and the then Israeli Justice Minister, Tzipi Livni, had called the measure an apartheid measure. And the implementation of such a ban would have furthered an already massively segregated society.
Now, Nabila, you've written about your experiences travelling the bus, and you compare, and I'm going to quote something that you've written, you compare the endemically divided nature of Israel, a society uncomfortable similar to the racist Alabama of the 1950s. Now, this measure, if it surfaces, how bad would it be? How would that change the life of many people there?
It would change the life of people living there dramatically and for worse. Segregation in Israel has already extended to roads for years. Generally, that means modern highways for Israelis and potholed tracks for the Palestinians. There is also a high security divide, nicknamed the apartheid wall, that runs for 690 kilometers. And one of its main functions is to protect those responsible for illegal land grabs and the demolition of Palestinian homes. There was also a United Nations Human Rights Committee report calling on Israelis to end the institutionalized discriminations against Palestinians. So this is a very serious issue, clearly, for an already divided society.
Nabila Ramdani, French-Algerian journalist, thank you very much for taking time to speak to us. And we invite, as we said, Israeli government officials to join our programme to talk about the now suspended travel ban, but they have declined. Thanks very much, Nabila. Now,